Well, good morning, everyone. You all quiet down really nicely. You could teach our students a thing or two. Well, I'm Ellen Granberg. I'm the president of the George Washington University, and it is a pleasure to welcome you all to our Foggy Bottom campus. I'd like to thank Jack McDougall from the Greater Washington Board of Trade and Kathy Hollinger from the Greater Washington Partnership for bringing us all here together this morning. We at GW are proud members of both of these organizations, and I am personally really delighted to have the opportunity to host the 2025 Capital Regional Transportation Forum. So thank you both so much for giving us this opportunity. Now, as many of you probably saw, starting this summer, Washington, D.C. officially overtook Los Angeles as the city with the worst traffic in the country. Our average commute time is 33.4 minutes, the highest in the nation. We don't just have a rush hour, we have a rush 6.5 hours, as anyone who drove into the city today probably well knows. Now, for years, people joked that our region's congestion could rival anything on the West Coast, and now we have the data to prove it. And I'm a native West Coaster. I'm happy to give the crown to DC in preservation of my friends and family back in California. But our commutes are not just long. They take place in a city and in a region where traffic patterns are extraordinarily complex. In DC's 69 square miles alone, we have 1,100 miles of streets, almost 1,500 miles of sidewalk, 85 miles of bike lanes, 241 bridges, 16 tunnels, and 278 capital bike share stations. These numbers suggest some of the challenges that you are here to discuss as part of today's forum. Present here today are leaders who recognize that the issues of safety, of climate resilience, of economic vitality, of equitable mobility don't just stop at the Beltway or any jurisdictional line. Our regional transportation ecosystem rises or stalls together. And at GW, we're especially well positioned to serve as a convening partner in that urgent work. Our location in the heart of Washington allows us to connect world-class researchers with policymakers, industry leaders, and community partners to turn discovery into practical solutions. Across engineering, public health, data science, and artificial intelligence, our faculty and students are developing innovations that strengthen climate resilience, improve mobility, and support healthier and more connected communities. For example, through GW Engineering's nationally recognized transportation program led by Professor Samer Hamdar, we're advancing safer, smarter, and more resilient transportation systems. This work integrates engineering, data science, and public policy to reimagine how cities move. Through the Alliance for a Sustainable Future and the GW Law School, the university convened experts from government, industry, and advocacy to examine the future of the U.S. electric vehicle and battery manufacturing and the evolving tax and tariff policies that will shape growth in this sector. We're also innovating at the intersection of artificial intelligence and transportation science, exploring areas like AI-enhanced traffic modeling and connected vehicle technology, which have the potential to improve safety, efficiency, and the in-car experience. Our research ensures that emerging policies around clean mobility can be informed by the latest discoveries. These efforts reflect GW's commitment to shaping cities that are smarter, safer, and more sustainable. And they reinforce why this moment presents a rare opportunity to rethink how our region moves, to embrace innovation, and to ensure accessibility and equity for every community. We're very proud to support this critical work, and we're grateful for the essential role that each of you plays in improving our region's transportation future. So I want to thank you so much for being here on the GW campus today. I hope you enjoy your time and that you have a very, very productive meeting. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I need more energy from all of you. Good morning. Nice. I'm Kathy Hollinger. I'm the CEO of the Greater Washington Partnership. I want to welcome everyone to our 8th annual Capital Region Transportation Forum. We're excited to partner with the Greater Washington Board of Trade on a really impactful event, one that has been for the last 8 years, bringing together the region's most influential transportation voices to chart a path forward for our mobility needs. As we kick off the program, I just want to offer a few thank yous and acknowledgments, of course, to Jack McDougall for your continued collaboration between our two organizations. This remains an event that really illustrates the strong relationships between our organizations. Big thank you to the team at the Board of Trade. If the Board of Trade team can raise your hand, give them a big round of applause for today. And a big thank you to the Greater Washington Partnership team for their work. Hands up. Really appreciate the work that they do together, not only in making sure that this event happens, but really as they come together more broadly to champion transportation investments that fuel our region's economic growth. A big thank you to President Granberg and the George Washington University for making this beautiful auditorium available to us, a recently renovated space. GW has long been a cornerstone of our city, contributing research, thought leadership, and community partnerships that anchor our city but really help move our region forward. And last but certainly not least, to our event sponsors, to Waymo, Amazon, Transurban, Uber, WSP, and First National Bank. Your dedication to our region's transportation network is critical to our economic success. So a big round of applause to our sponsors. There is no question that this year has been quite a turbulent year for our region, especially during times of uncertainty. We know that it is vital to reach some consensus on regional priorities as we think about a path toward collective action on responding to some of our region's most pressing issues, transportation being one of them. For those unfamiliar to the partnership or with the partnership, we are an alliance of CEOs, the largest employers here in the region. Our region is broad in that it stretches from Baltimore through Washington, D.C., down to Richmond, and it's an alliance that is committed to advancing a vibrant, economically competitive, and prosperous region. We work with so many organizations throughout that footprint, of course, Board of Trade being one of them, Council of Governments being another, as well as the consortium of universities. And all of us are committed to shared competitiveness here in this region to ensure that we are poised to compete on a global stage. We hope that today's programming underscores the unique opportunity that this region has to invest in forward-thinking transportation systems and innovative technologies, keeping us at the forefront of mobility's future. We have a full agenda today. First, we'll hear from Randy Clark on the state of Metro, followed by a panel focused on the DMV moves process and cementing a path forward towards a uniform transportation vision and long-term sustainable funding for Metro Rail, a process that has been rigorous and committed to in terms of stakeholders throughout the region. Then we're going to turn to a panel of transportation experts who will explore how our region can shape a future-ready mobility network powered by better data and innovative technologies. And then we are going to close it out with Jack, who will offer key next steps and opportunities for continued engagement on these pressing issues. So with that, we will get started, and I get to introduce our first speaker of the day, Randy Clark. Oh, there you are, Randy, our General Manager of Metro. Randy joined Metro in 2022. Feels that you've been there much longer than 2022, Randy. He joined at a time of significant change and has been a terrific partner and leader in the years since, Before joining Metro, Randy led Austin's transit agency for more than 4 years and held other key leadership operations and safety positions across the country, including MBTA and the American Public Transportation Association. Metro has much that they have celebrated with recent wins despite some significant regional headwinds, including launching tap-and-go payment on rail and bus, implementing the Better Bus Network redesign, and winning the American Public Transportation Association's Transit Agency of the Year Award, Metro's first win in the category in nearly 30 years. I think everyone in this room can agree that Randy has unmatched energy and passion. I like saying that because he really does. One of the most enthusiastic humans I know, of course, as an advocate for transportation, for the system, but really for the city and the region. And we are really delighted to be able to hear the updates on ridership performance and the efforts to establish long-term sustainable funding that supports a reliable and safe transit system. So with that, please give a warm welcome to Randy Clark.
All right, good morning, everybody. Kathy says I'm the Energizer Bunny, so I guess I gotta do that to get everyone going. They had their coffee. Plus, I'm just the warm-up for Clark Mercer, who is easily the most energetic, passionate person in the room. So I'm sure he'll bring that as well. So, but seriously, good morning, everyone. Great to be back at GW. I was just telling the president I can't wait to go to a hoops game again. It was a great experience, and Foggy Bottom was my home station for the last 3 years, so I know this area very well, so it's great to be back. So first off, just Jack, Kathy, thank you for having me and the Metro team, and just appreciate your never-ending partnership, support, not just for us, but the region. At a critical time in the region, and the business community's leadership is so important, so thank you. I make a little joke about Clark, but Clark in one way is my partner in crime. I just really appreciate Clark, Cog, Brian Hill for all his work on the DMV Moves effort. There's tons of stakeholders in the room that I recognize, and I just say thank you for all your support and collaboration, Metro. Elected officials as well. They're the ones that have to take the hard votes that we sometimes all try to get them to do. And obviously, I see some of our board members in the room, and just thank you for all of your time, your support, and all your hard work on behalf of Metro. And then last but not least, we have some staff members in the room, and I just am in awe of what our 13,000 men and women do every day to move this region in so many ways. I'm just really proud to be with them. So I'm going to go as fast as I can. I talk pretty quickly because I don't want to delay the thing too much here, but I want to give you a really state of Metro from where I see it today. And I would say this way, I think the state of Metro is pretty strong, but we're at a critical time. The state of Metro in the future years at a forum like this could be, Metro is fantastic, world class. I think we play in the world class, but we're not at the top of the world class. We could be there, or we could go pretty significantly backwards. And we are at that pivotal point right now, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But right now, I think we're in a really good spot. And the reason that, listen, there's lots of numbers out there. The numbers that I feel the best about are what customers say about us. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here. We're here to deliver service for our customers. And I use the word customer very specific, right? Not rider, customer. We want to earn their rides every day. And 92% of customers said rail satisfaction was high, and on bus, 83%. Those are the highest ratings we've ever had in Metro in the last year, in the history of Metro. And that means the product we are delivering, not perfect. I have failings on the system from time to time myself, but the system, I think we could all agree, is performing very well for the vast majority of people in the region, and that's the metric that I really feel great about. Next up, somehow I put my deck upside down here. I messed my whole self up. Now I'm going to have to wing it, which is going to really scare the comms team. They already don't like that I wing most things every day. So I apologize. Wow, I never kind of do that. But let's see if we could kind of improvise at the same time here. So, you know, partnership is what we do here at Metro. It's the key to everything. Metro doesn't do anything alone, and we are very unique. 3 states and the federal government, plus everyone in between, right? And it's really complex in how we have to work together. This is a slide that really shows you, I think, in the last year where partnership really happens. So real estate is a big focus for us, not because we're a real estate developer, because we are one that help our partners develop and move our communities forward, grow our tax base, and help with affordable housing. So our tag is very simple. Wherever Metro goes, the community grows. And you can see from events recently at West Falls Church, we got stuff in Maryland, we got stuff in DC, we got our partners at the FTA. We've secured over $150 million of federal grant money here in the last couple of years. Big, big dollars that the federal government is helping support drive this region. Hitachi has a new factory in Maryland building our new 8000 series trains. Partnership takes many forms, but I think this is really critical that Metro continues to lean in to say, hey, partners, how can we be here to help you? Next up is safety security, right? And so last week's tragic event should all remind us of the seriousness of what we deal with every single day. 30 feet difference last week's event, that's at a Metro station. So tragically, what happened to those National Guardsmen could have just as easily happened on a Metro system, right? It's why we work on safety, security every day with our partners. So these are just a couple quick slides. I'm not going to go through them all to show you that this is our core value. This is the thing that keeps me up every single night, our core team. Everyone coming to work and getting home safely every day, and every customer coming and having a safe journey is our number one care every day, every hour, every minute of every day, right? And so you could see these trends. We are leading the industry across all the safety measures across rail, bus, and Metro Access except one, across the entire industry. That means your Metro system is the safest system in the United States. And I don't think we could always have said that about the Metro system, and I think that is a testament of how everyone came together to ensure that this incredible, important asset is working well for the community. Law enforcement, though, is the other part of what we do on safety security. And we do everything from national security events here, from inauguration to January 6th to President Carter's funeral, to July 4th. We're hosting, NFL draft's going to be coming up. We do all of these types of things. Plus, we do daily policing with all of our partners from Fairfax to Montgomery County to Prince George's to D.C. to Alexandria to Loudoun County, you name it. We're in there every single day being a good partner on that. And I just want to reassure everyone, we really take public safety serious. It's probably the number one thing Jack and Kathy have talked to me about when I first got here is how critical the public safety role is here at Metro. We have a very significant police department. This is what we take serious every day, keeping people safe out on the system. We're going to talk here just a second about crime stats. I'm really proud of this. We've had a 55% decrease in crime on the system in the last 3 years. We are currently on pace, we have 1 month to go, to close out the lowest crime year in the history of Metro. Just to reiterate, the lowest crime year in the history of Metro. There we go. I didn't know how many times I was going to have to say that. Listen, that just doesn't happen, right? We have a great police chief. We got great support. We put a lot of resources toward it. But it's really important. If people do not feel safe taking the system, then we're never going to get ridership to where it needs to be. And this bottom shows you where people's perception of safety, right? Look how much better that is. And that is why it's driving ridership, and our employees feel safer on the system doing their job every single day. So I wanted to just take a second to recognize that. It's been a year of innovation, and Kathy mentioned a couple of these things. Really proud of our Tap Ride Go. You can use your credit and debit card on any train station and any bus out on the system. And we did that faster and cheaper than any agency in the history of the world that has done that. And we did it in a really innovative way with 3 vendors and really came together to do that. Already we're seeing 6 million trips on rail using credit debit card. Just think of that, right? We're a big tourist destination. Our job is to make it flexible and easy for people to use our system. Other things, bike lockers. GW, actually Foggy Bottom is going to be one of our first ones. People have been asking for these for a long time to help with our multimodal infrastructure. We're working on things like solar, Metro Rewind, Metro Pulse, interactive video on board of all our trains and buses, ways to communicate with our staff. Financial stewardship. It's been a great year on financial stewardship. Over the last 3 years, we've identified $500 million in cost savings and cost avoidance. And that's everything from every employee at Metro taking a 0 last year, no merit increases across the board, to Consulting dollars looked at differently. Capital projects looked at differently. How we use vehicles, everything. We're looking always under the hood. We know it's taxpayers' money, and it's on us to use every dollar very efficiently. Last year, we ended the year $120 million under budget, which is very significant. And with all the, we had a kind of a challenging year last year, $120 million under budget, and we were able to put $92 million of that into the capital program, which further helps keep the subsidy down and makes our DMV moves ask even less. So that's what it's all about. How do we use every dollar as efficiently as possible in the system? But I think the team worked really hard to carry that out. Next up is our capital. And we'll talk about this in a second about the challenges ahead, but I am really proud of where we are as an organization from our infrastructure. And I mentioned that earlier about reliability and performance. The money that came together in 2019 was a really big deal. In many ways, helped save the system. And we put that to work, and we put it to work really well. And now you look at this. This graph on the right, I shouldn't say I get a kick out of that because that's maybe the not right word. But when I lived here in 2017, and Metro on fire was a topic all the time. Metro's no longer on fire. And I'm not saying that's a good baseline. Just making that clear. But I want to make that crystal clear that that money was put to good use. Rail car reliability up 60%, right, since 22. We are running more bus service today with 100 less buses than we had a year ago. We already got rid of all of our 2Ks. Now we're starting to get rid of some of our 3000 series trains, running more service with less vehicles. That's both efficiency, it's reliability, and it's safety. And that money was put to really good use. I'm leading up to where we're going to need more money, by the way, if anyone hasn't picked up that theme. But I'm trying to show that we've really put that to good use. So Kathy gave my biggest thunder here away. We've had a really good year of recognition across the board. We won an International Cleanliness Award. We beat college campuses and airports around the world, got recognized. Metro systems really, every time someone comes into town, they're like, wow, the Metro's so clean. We work really hard to keep this system clean. We won a National Safety Security Award. We won some marketing and partnership awards. But we also won the Agency of the Year Award, and I'm just beyond proud of that, right? To be recognized by your peers across North America as the best, the new standard in transit, is a really big deal, and I'm just really proud of our team for accomplishing that. Thank you. So let's talk about where we are. The job's never done, and I just highlight the word collective. It's not just Metro's job's not done, it's all of us, right? Metro is nothing more than it's a regional collective asset. I have the privilege of working here right at the moment, so the staff, Metro's bigger than all of us. It's a thing that connects us all together, and we all know that, right? If we live here, Metro is one of the most important things that makes this region both economically competitive, but also quality of life, right? And so the job is not done. We need to solve our long-term capital dollars. We've done a really good job on the operating side. We now feel pretty secure managing operating go forward. We've been putting money the last few years back into the capital program as best we can. But the money in 2018, 2019 was not indexed. And that's no fault of anyone. It's just the realities of between politics and the time, right? And that happened. But if we're all honest, everyone in this room has experienced inflation since 2019, right? We have parts of our power system that are up 60% in just the last 3 to 4 years. Think about that, right? You're never going to have a revenue source that grows to that level. But we need a predictable source that we can manage a revolving bond program. We do not have the revenue to have a normal revolving bond program that a municipality or state would have, right? Because we can't generate our own revenue. So the ask here with our partners is you will have better stability and predictability because we will now have predictability. And then we'll stop doing this and we all start saying, here are the objectives that you're going to measure to. So 2029, our fiscal year, we are currently set for an $800 million reduction in our capital program. That is an enormous amount of money. That is going to destroy our capital program, right? We are going to go from proactive, getting escalators replaced before they break, to purely response maintenance, right? So all of the good work we just showed, fires will go like that over time. Reliability will go down over time. It's not going to happen instantaneously, but the curve is going to happen and we'll be back to the teens. None of us should want to go back to what we came out of, right? And to me, the big proof here is we are going to be putting a list together of things you get for that money. And the DMV Moose process, I think, did this really well. Nick came in later, so I want to give Nick Donahue a call out as well. Nick facilitated the whole process and got this region to agree we need to modernize our rail system, right? So if you've been to Dulles Airport, you've seen an automated rail system with platform screen doors. No one has ever trespassed or fell or had an accident and got in front of that train and got hurt. This month alone, we've had 4 people hit by trains, 2 people died, and arrested, I think, 6 or 7 people for trespassing. Every single day, we have that type of issue. Reliability, we're never going to get to the world standard of 98, 99% unless we do real good modernization. We have a signaling system from the 70s, right? I'm talking 8-track cassette player kind of infrastructure in a cloud-based world. This is what we're going to get. We're going to get rail modernization and bus priority. And if we do this right, we're going to replace our signaling system. We're going to have our new 8000 series fleet be amazing. And we're going to have high reliability, much safer, and way more cost efficient, and we'll break the curve of cost here at the organization. On the bus side, we are going to get more bus priority as a team, working with our municipal partners and our jurisdictional partners, trying to drive more people on bus. I believe we should be carrying 500,000 people a day on bus. Today, we might do 420, 425. That is an obtainable goal that we can get to. The bus is such a connecting lifeline to so many people in our region. If you pick up a coffee in the morning, if you do a late night dinner, all those types of activities rely on people to take the bus to work. They are the backbone of our economy in this region. They deserve to have good, high quality transportation as well, right? That's what we're going to deliver. We have that funding. If not, we're going to show this. All of a sudden, our backlog goes up massively. And the problem that we had in 2019 looks small, much smaller than what it is. Or we solve this thing, we have a manageable backlog, and we have the best system in North America for a long, long time, and we're world class. So it's the call to action. I guess that's how I would wrap it up, right? Which is, we are going to do everything we can here at Metro to run the ship the right way. We are going to make mistakes. Listen, I've been married for almost 20 years. Trust me, every single day I'm told I make mistakes. But I promise you this, we are given the best we got as a team to drive the best system for you all and use your tax dollars really appropriately. But we need this to be a partnership. We need others to speak and say the value of Metro. It's obvious that the Mumata GM, the board members and staff are going to go tell people the value of Metro. I mean, I think that's the base, right? Other voices need to be at this table to explain how they think that there's value of Metro and what this asset helps them, whether it's our business leaders' economy, environment, equity, you name it, Metro plays in that space. So our ask is simple. $460 million re-baselines the capital account, and for the first time ever in the history of Metro, it's pegged to a predictable growth rate. Is 3% the right number? No one knows, right? If someone had said 3% in 2019, it was like great. And then pandemic inflation happened, and it didn't make sense. But we need a number that we could build into a revolving bond program and manage the thing over 15, 20, 30, 50 years. That number will do that. The models show we are going to be sustainable and do that. We're going to get that bond program. We're going to run great maintenance program to keep the assets great. We're going to modernize our rail system, and we're going to have great bus priority and move a lot more people. So others have acted. New York City has acted. And whether you like congestion pricing or not, there's people in this room that probably love it, and there's probably people that hate it. It's irrelevant. That's the solution they did. New York City's never been better set for funding on transit, and it's probably the history. Chicagoland, Illinois government passed a huge package 3 weeks ago, to solve their $1.5 billion into the Chicagoland transit network to make sure CTA and Metro could run great service for the future and modernize. Charlotte, last election cycle, a couple weeks ago, passed a massive referendum to expand transit, rail, and bus. Toronto has a $70 billion rail expansion program in Toronto. Seattle has a $54 billion program expanding in Seattle. Seattle competes with us for jobs and quality of life, right? LA has something like a $70 billion program. We are the only place in the country not competing for federal money. If we get this money, we now can go leverage the federal money and bring it back home and even get more value here for this region. So the job's not done. My ask is simple. Please join us in working together to actually secure this in the future. And we are here to support you all in any ways we can help. So thank you again, Jack and Kathy, for letting me have this opportunity. The state of Metro is strong, and let's make it great. to introduce Clark?
No, you're not. You're good.
Okay.
You're good. No, Randy, that was a powerful message to get on Giving Tuesday, so thank you. Clark Mercer, the executive, that was a joke, executive director of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, COG. We host a number of issues that the region works on, transportation being the number one. We house the Transportation Planning Board, and we can't do whether it's transit, whether it's roads, whether it's bridges. Can't plan for the future and invest in those things and make movement without private sector partners. So I want to thank Jack McDougall and the Board of Trade and your team, and Kathy Hollinger and Greater Washington Partnership. There cannot be better partners for the public sector to work with in this region than those two organizations and your staff. So thank you. And want to thank the supporters of this event today, including our friends from Uber. And I want to invite John Keene, the head of growth for Uber Transit, up here now to say a few words. John?
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to try to follow Randy's lead and be quick and energetic this morning. I'm John Keene. I lead our public transit partnerships team here at Uber. Our team works with public transit, local and state government, and higher education teams to find transportation gaps and fill them with our network of Uber driver partners. Let me begin by thanking Jack and the entire Board of Trade team here for letting us host this morning and sponsor this event. The Board of Trade's work to convene stakeholders and advance the collaborative solutions here is vital to the region, and we're grateful for the effort and to be a part of it. It was great to hear from Randy Clark this morning. I'd like to congratulate the WMATA team on their continued success and thank them for their role as leaders in public transit, not only here in the DMV, but in the greater US as well. As a longtime DC resident who relied on public transit every day, we couldn't ask for a better team to lead the organization through this period of increased scrutiny. DMV residents know that the commitment to safety, reliability, and accessibility have been driving the agency forward for years, and I have every confidence that that upward trend will continue. Uber Transit's collaboration with WMATA through the Abilities Ride program, which we jointly launched in January of 2020, has been a real point of pride for our team. The Abilities Ride program offers passengers with disabilities who opt in to have the option for some of their rides to be booked on Uber instead of traditional paratransit, offering increased reliability and a more on-demand experience. Since that launch, the program has proven to be transformational to passengers with disabilities in the region. In 2025 alone, Uber's delivered more than 600,000 trips to over 24,000 unique riders in the DMV region in support of this program. Even more notable to me is that 25% growth in new riders this year, evidence of an evolving transit ecosystem and the value of offering flexible, reliable mobility options. I'm excited to hear from the panelists this morning on how we continue to plan and provide service options for this evolving population. For the finance folks in the room, WMATA reported an FY25 savings of nearly $30 million because of these optimized paratransit services. Because the cost per trip on Uber is 3 to 4 times cheaper than your traditional paratransit trip, we are able to provide a safe, reliable supplemental service for passengers that also brings cost savings to the agency. This partnership continues to demonstrate how thoughtful public-private partnership models can expand access and deliver high-quality service for riders who rely on public transit service every day. Our regional collaborations extend beyond WMATA, including our work with the MW COG. The workforce development programs that they run and we've previously partnered on allow folks to take transit to work and have an Uber in their pocket if the service isn't running when they get home, or vice versa, if their morning commute requires a service that the fixed route can't accommodate, we can get them there and push them towards public transit on the way to get home. These programs help fill transportation gaps that can otherwise limit access to employment. This is a strong example of how we can work hand in hand with local government agencies and support ridership, strengthen the network, and ensure that the system works for real-world schedules and real-world needs. Higher education partnerships are an equally important part of a thriving transit ecosystem. Being here at GW, maybe I should have pushed this towards the top, but this summer we signed a groundbreaking transportation partnership right here at GW. We are supporting a range of mobility programs, including late-night safe rides for students, intra-campus travel, transportation for volunteer and internship programs, and mobility support for faculty and staff. These initiatives ensure that transportation is never a barrier to safety, opportunity, or participation. At a time when it is more important than ever to encourage young people to engage with their local communities, removing mobility obstacles is essential. Whether it's helping students reach an internship enabling a volunteer service, or simply ensuring a safe trip home, this work expands access and strengthens community ties. All of these efforts reflect a shared principle. Accessible transportation is essential. Whether it is a daily commute, a medical appointment, or the ability to participate fully in community life, mobility must be an inclusive, dependable, and designed around the needs of every resident. Delivering on that commitment requires exactly the kind of collaboration represented in this room today. Thanks again to the Board of Trade, our partners, and to all of you for being here. It is now my pleasure to turn things over to our panel host, Nick Donahue, to kick off our discussion this morning. Thank you.
All right, as Nick comes to the stage, we're going to have a panel discussion now on DMV moves. And Brian Hill is first to the stage to sit down. Brian is the Chief Administrative Officer for Fairfax County. You all know Jack McDougall, President and CEO here at the Board of Trade, and Nick Donahue was Deputy Secretary of Transportation for several administrations in Virginia, and now owns his own consulting practice where he's worked with Virginia, Maryland, D.C. A quick intro to DMV moves, and then I'll hand it off. About 18 months ago, talking with Randy Clark and transit partners in the region, the Council of Governments agreed to partner with those transit partners and WMATA to take a step back and do a deep dive on how we could better coordinate all of our transit partners across the region, including Metro, but also more than 10 bus providers, VRE, and MARC, and answer two questions. One, how can we better coordinate, come up with a list of recommendations to implement on better coordination and efficiency? And then two, and Randy spoke to this, what is needed for a sustainable metro system? And when we agreed to partner with Randy, we said, look, we're going to pull in all of the region stakeholders, and you, Metro, will need to be willing to answer their questions over an 18-month period if we're really going to shake loose what is needed and what will be sustainable. And sustainable has two sides to that coin. What is sustainable for Metro to be able to issue bonds, pay them off, issue them again, have a revolving bond program, and what is sustainable for the folks paying the bill year over year, what can they manage to pay? And I want to give a big thank you to Randy and his team for answering those questions. Jack led the Community Partners Group, which was every business group in this region invited to the table. Labor groups invited to the table. Environmental groups invited to the table. Brian managed the Government Partners Group, which is every chief administrative officer, every CFO, and our transportation committees and authorities. And what we said is these are big, unwieldy groups, but at the end of this process, we don't want anyone in this region saying that they didn't have a seat at the table and an ability to ask the tough questions. Every business group in this region had the ability to ask of Metro any financial question or any management type question they've wanted to for 2 years. And Metro has answered those questions. And that number, I know Brian will attest to this, that number that Randy put up there started double what that number is. And we really started kicking the tires and beating that program up a bit to take a look at it. And that number came down from $900 million at the beginning to $460. And now it's time, and I'll hand this off to Nick, now it's time to work in Annapolis and in Richmond and in the Wilson building here in DC to get that number over the line. And I will just say, as someone, I was in Richmond for 8 years as the governor's chief of staff. And when you're in Richmond or you're in Annapolis, you look at this region and you're very grateful that this region provides half of the GDP for each of the states, because you are very willing to take those tax dollars and send them to the rest of the respective states. And in order to change that dynamic, we have to have the business community coalesce and go to Richmond, go to Annapolis, along with our public sector partners, and say these are the priorities for the region. This is the priority for half of the GDP in the state, is to invest in Metro so we can keep growing jobs in the economy. And with that, I'll hand things off to Nick. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Clark, and thank you everyone for coming this morning to hear our discussion about DMV moves. I'm really honored to be here today with Jack McDougall and Brian Hill, who co-chaired the advisory groups that help support the DMV Moves Task Force. As Clark said, the DMV Moves initiative was kind of a joint initiative put forward by the WMATA board and the COG board, and ultimately kind of the big body there was this task force. And we spent a lot of time working with these advisory groups, asking very detailed questions of WMATA, but also getting direction from that task force. And so before we get into some of the discussion here, I want to talk about some of the direction we received that really influenced the final product that the general manager talked about earlier. So, when you talk about transit in this region, you can go in a million different directions, right? You could talk about state of good repair. You could talk about maximizing or modernizing the system. You could talk about expansions. The task force throughout this process was very clear to me, and in turn these co-chairs, that what they wanted us focusing on was ensuring the state of good repair of the system and maximizing what it delivered for this region. They told us until that was done, they didn't want to have a lot of discussion about expansion. We needed to get the house in order and get as much out of that house as we could. And after that, we could start to have discussions potentially about expansion. But in terms of where we were for DMV moves, that was not something that we were trying to solve for. And so it's not going to be a part of what was presented by the general manager or what we're going to be talking about here today. One of the other things that we talked about with the task force is how did we want to solve the funding need, whatever it might be, as we worked through this process? Did we want to, as a region, come together and do a single regional revenue source that would fund WMATA, or did we want to follow more of the 2018 model or the past model where each jurisdiction, by that I mean Virginia, Maryland, and DC, comes up with its own way of funding what those needs would be? And we talked about that for a while, and there's pros and cons depending on what your perspective is. And the task force was very clear that each jurisdiction should solve this problem in its own way, just like they did in 2018, in whatever way best meets their needs. And so today we're not going to be talking about a single funding source, but rather the need for a strategy in all three of these jurisdictions to work with those governing bodies to move forward whatever the right solution is for Maryland, for DC, or for Virginia to help fund kind of the DMV moves funding need. And so now with that kind of like background, these two guys chaired these advisory groups and went through, I think it was 27 total meetings. I think Jack had 14 and Brian's group had 13. I just wanted to stop and say,
That's right, yeah.
is there anything that you guys, what are your biggest takeaways that you want to kind of share with these folks who didn't necessarily go through that same experience as we move into this next phase of the process, which is really socializing the outcomes of DMV moves and really starting to kind of advocate for the recommendations that came forward?
That's a great question, and thank you all for being here today. When I got this task from COG, I remember Randy Clark talking about Frankenstein and the funding models, and I'm like, what does this guy from Canada know about funding models in America? And Randy and I had a lot of conversations. DC does it one way, Maryland does it another way, Virginia does it another way. So this was a unique opportunity for us to all sit in a room together. I just want to make sure that everybody here knows that the initial ask by Randy was $1 billion. Not 900. I guess that feels better to say 900 than 1 billion. Coming from Fairfax County and talking with my CAOs in Fairfax, Loudoun, Tim Hemstreet in Loudoun, Mark Schwartz in Arlington, Jim Parajan, and believe it or not, the district, Kevin Donahue, we all sat together with Joe McAndrew trying to figure out how we can make something happen. We knew it wasn't going to be $1 million. Randy probably hoped it was going to be 800 million. That's not going to happen either. But we got to a place where it was 460 million. I have to tell you, those 13 meetings and absolutely detailing and eyeballing the numbers, I have to give the WMATA staff a lot of kudos for allowing us to get inside of their books to actually figure out what is state of good repair. And we're going to get there. The question is now for the political bodies to figure out how we're going to fund it. I think we have a good path in Virginia. I think DC's got a path. We're going to work with Maryland, but the key is getting it into a good state of repair. 460 million. Just for everybody to know, in Commonwealth Virginia, the localities are the ones that bond the financing. State really doesn't do that. So we are on the hook. Fairfax County, Alexandria, Arlington, Loudoun County now, we're all on the hook for pretty much all of the capital funding. We need to have that capital funding to ensure that we can continue to have a world-class system. And I think this DMV moves process got us to that place.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, well, great, thanks. And Nick, thanks you and Brian for the work that we've done collectively over the past 18 months, almost 2 years. And Kathy, thank you again for your partnership in putting this conversation on and continuing to have that conversation, and Clark and Randy, for your ongoing partnership and the efforts you're doing there. So it's sort of interesting. I think Clark probably understated a little bit the conversations, and I guess maybe that's why we needed an extra meeting. Some of our meetings went quite long because we did have disparate views at the table. If you think about the various interests that come together around transit, transportation, and mobility, I would say the one overriding takeaway is that there was really strong consensus around the need for a high-functioning, world-class public transit system. I think there was no ambiguity around that whatsoever. And so I thought that was extremely positive. And we did up front spend a lot of time thinking about what is the vision statement for this, and we came to the conclusion, again, business and community advocates and others, that, that a world-class transit system is the backbone of our economy. It touches everything that we do. And a lot of the other issues that we work on and the other things that we are trying to solve for, without an effective transportation and transit system, we can't even get to those, right? And so, as a region, we do have a responsibility to make sure that we get this right in doing that. I would also say, too, that there's a little bit of a discrepancy, I think, between maybe the public sector side and the business and advocacy side, because we don't really care as much about the jurisdictions as the jurisdictions do. No offense, Brian.
Shocking.
Yes, shocking. What we want is an integrated system that works, right? And we want to figure out what the funding model is, and whether it's a little bit different in Montgomery County or Maryland, or whether in Virginia. That's not as relevant to us from our perspectives, though we know we need to get the funding to it, so we have to work through that. So I think one of the lessons learned here too, now that we have proposals in place to stabilize the system, and we can get into more detail around that, is that we really need to start thinking much more proactively about what comes next. How do we then take the baseline that we have here, the 2025 APTA award-winning transit agency, and how do we propel that into the future in a way that nobody else can come close to? And that's going to require this region to act, think, and behave very, very differently. And we need to start thinking about this as an integrated system, not separate parts, right? So that the sum of the parts is greater than the total. We need to start thinking differently about that. That's going to affect how we start to think about funding, as well as how we think about governance and management. We can't manage this system by 3 jurisdictional views. We have to manage this system through an agency view. And I would say that's probably one of the most important cultural aspects to this that we now are in a position to push forward. And so we actually did spend a lot of time in our group talking about those types of issues, because that's where the real potential of the value of this asset comes to the table. And until we can get to that, we're always just going to kind of be floating along.
Yeah.
No, thanks for that, Jack. And then, Jack, I actually want to come back to you, because Brian and I talked about this, but you and I talked about this a lot longer, which is one of the kind of key takeaways from 2018, as people are thinking about this initiative and, what have we learned from that time. And I think you called it the Magna Carta. And I'll just kind of give you a quick introduction. So for those of you who may not know, I was heavily involved in the 2018 funding package. And if I get 5 people in a room who I sat in the same room with 2018 and say, what did we expect to have happen from this? I get 6 answers. And some of you are like smiling, like, oh, that's cute. No, that's true. Like, it's actually what happens. Like, people, their recollections are different. People have different understanding about what was going to happen. And so, Jack, you really pushed for this concept that, again, you called the Magna Carta. Could you talk a little bit about that to this group so they can understand what we've done a little differently in this effort here?
So one of the things that we've done here is that we've documented everything that we've worked through here. So we have a shared set of assumptions that go into the modeling, that go into the projections that we have here, that go into the ask, and we're asking for the 3% increase, indexed to inflation. But at least then we can come back in the circumstances like you described earlier, if we experience, and hopefully we don't, another COVID, or we hit 40% energy inflation or something like that. At least we understand what we agreed to in 2025, so that we can then say within the parameters of that agreement, this is what we can do. But then we can all agree that in order to be functional, we have to go outside of that. But we can all address what that means. And so having a very clear, documented set of assumptions right up front, This is what the 460 million will get us. This is what we expect over, as Randy was talking about, the long-term 20, 30, 40-year bonding period, so that we can at least manage to that. And then that allows the agency to actually manage their capital program in a way that we as a region have not been able to do to date.
Yep.
So that's, again, putting us a lot farther along. And we can get into some of the things that we hope to accomplish through that, and Randy touched on some of them. But that really is a differentiator, And none of this, one of the things, and I'll say this, and people have heard me say this too, is that sometimes, our region can get stuck chasing rainbows, But this puts us in a position where we can at least look for the rainbow. We needed to do this very hard work that we haven't done since the system was founded 60 years ago. Putting this in place then allows us to get to that next level. So this was really critical. So that's, it's not sexy, it's not glamorous, there's not a lot of headlines here. But unless we did this, and so the guidance that we were getting from the task force was spot on, we had to get this done first. It was foundational.
Yeah, and I just want to, for all you advocates out there, really reinforce Jack's point as we have these discussions in the coming months with the elected officials and other decision makers. Baked into DMV moves are new accountability provisions that will help us as a region hold this agency kind of accountable as they move forward with these new investments. But it also means that we'll have to recognize where there may be times where, as Jack said, in 2025, we all made an assumption that we thought was reasonable, and sometimes the world turns left when we think it's going to turn right. And in that case, it's not per se an issue where whoever's the general manager at that time has made a mistake. It's that the world happened differently. And as a region, we'll need to come back together and figure out what we want to do at that stage. And so I think it's a really important thing that Jack was hitting on. Brian, as we've talked about kind of what happens now that the boards have endorsed the DMV moves recommendations, I think a lot of folks are expecting Virginia to potentially be the first place where this discussion happens. But I think Virginia actually has a slightly bigger problem to solve than DC and Maryland there. And so could you talk a little bit about kind of the operating funding needs that Virginia has in addition to these capital needs, where Maryland and DC have funded theirs long term, but in Virginia that still hasn't been solved?
Thanks for that question. Why are we all here, right? Yeah. So the start from my process actually after, and having Jack as a co-chair was great. We worked seamlessly together. Unfortunately, he couldn't get it done in 12 meetings. 15. But all
14
jokes,
was pretty good.
Yeah, but all jokes aside, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to my board to give a presentation on DMV moves with Clark Mercer. We're going to try and get a resolution built in Fairfax. I believe Clark is also going to be at Loudoun County this afternoon to get that squared away, and then Arlington and Alexandria. And we have to really just cobble it all together. So when all the localities are all in line with at least the understanding that there's going to be an additional outlay of cash. I believe the date is December 16th. I have a legislative meeting. 17th?
Yes.
Okay. I will be meeting with our delegates and our senators and hopefully our governor-elect to pitch the plan. We have various funding sources in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Obviously, Fairfax is one, as well as all the localities, but there's DRPT, there's MVTA, MVTC. We have to get all those sources together. We have a companion group called SJ28. They're working on a funding mechanism for WMATA. If that happens, my life is a lot easier during the budget process, to be quite frank. I'm hopeful that our legislative team and delegation can support the initiative of the $460 million as opposed to Fairfax County and Arlington and Alexandria and Loudoun coming up with those funds. We've had good dialogue and good discussion. However, we're not there yet. I mean, the key is that we are continuing the dialogue and the discussion. I'm also speaking with our DC Representative Kevin Donahue, the city administrator there, as well as Joe McAndrew over in Maryland. We have to come forward together. But when you talk about the future of Metro and WMATA, you also have to think about the future of our region. We're looking at VRE, we're looking at MARC, we're looking at Longbridge. It's about a path of taking our region and bringing it and elevating it to the next level. Our tourism is key. Our economic development is key. But key is being able to provide a service that is absolutely better than any place in the world. We look at London, England. We look at Japan. We look at Canada, unfortunately, TTC. However, we need to be the best. And if we can't be the best, we need not to try to say we're going to try to be the best. We must be the best as we move forward. So that's where we are. Hopefully today I can put one step forward, at least in Fairfax County, put a marker. My budget is going to be released on February 17th. I'll say this to Randy. My goal is to have WMATA funding inside of that budget. That's it, commensurate with the $460 million or less, depending on what we do. Hold on. Depending on what happens with our state outcome, with the Commonwealth's outcome.
No, that's very fair. And Brian, you got to this earlier about how, like in Virginia, the funding model is different, and the burden, absent state action, falls to those local governments. And so, another thing that in Virginia we're hoping folks will address and solve this upcoming session is the region collectively came together and put additional operating funding into WMATA over the last several years. Virginia did that through one-time general fund surpluses. For any of you who've been reading the Post recently, you may be seeing that the budget situation isn't looking like it's a world of continued surpluses in Virginia. And so I know Brian and his board is all hopeful that the Assembly will work with them to find a way to make sure that doesn't fall just on the backs of those local property taxes in the jurisdictions in Northern Virginia. Jack, we had a lot of discussions in your group, as you, I think, politely said, disparate viewpoints at times on issues. And so, in the DMV moves recommendations is both funding to really ensure the state of good repair of the system and make sure we don't fall back to where we were before the funding from 2018, but also money to modernize the Metro Rail system to make it faster, more reliable, more efficient from an operating kind of standpoint. At times in our meetings, we had folks kind of saying, well, is this the time, based on all the headwinds the region is facing, to make these types of investments? And I think we had that discussion a lot there. And so could you talk with these folks about kind of some of the things you said when we were having those discussions in the advisory group about, with the headwinds, whether it's the time to make those investments?
Well, I would say there's always headwinds, so it doesn't really matter, right? So, today, tomorrow, the next day, there's going to be something. There's going to be some reason. So you got to make the investments now. Tomorrow it's more expensive, right? So every day we wait, it costs us more and more and more. So we need to start making those investments. And particularly important, as Randy pointed out too, the signaling system is outdated, plain and simple. There's no other way to explain that. A lot of the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers that built the component parts for that, are no longer in business, And so WMATA does an amazing job at holding that together. They maintain all of the safety requirements that are necessary, but it prevents us from doing things that are necessary to really ensure that we're getting the value out of our assets. I'll say with you, you spend a lot of money on an Apple Watch, for those of you that do, but I guarantee you I'm only getting about 25% of the value out of it, right? And so and maybe with a watch that makes sense, but on a transit system, that doesn't make any sense. We have to maximize the value of those assets. Yeah. So we need this capital investment now to upgrade the signaling system. Give you an example right now. We talk a lot about the bottleneck between Stadium Armory and Roslyn. So you have 3 lines going through there. You have blue, orange, and silver lines going through there. So you can put, 27 trains an hour through that tunnel? So that's a bottleneck. If we can move to automated train operations, we can up that to potentially 32 trains or so an hour, increasing our throughput by about 30%. That potentially avoids the need for another tunnel under DC. Not that we couldn't even get the funding for that, which we likely couldn't at 30, 40, or $50 billion. You could never get the environmental impact assessments done to do that. So that holds us back as a region. So we need to think very differently about how do we use our assets. And when you think about it, $460 million a year between 3 jurisdictions to make the kind of investments that we're talking about here, it's really a no-brainer. And so how do we put that forward? So that's just a first entry point to getting us to where the system operates at much more of a world-class level, alleviates a lot of the issues and problems that we're experiencing right now, allows the agency to continue to grow ridership so that we can come off that list that Ellen mentioned earlier, which is not one of the lists that we want to be on. as a congested region so that we can get more people on transit. So I do think that, this is the time to be thinking about that. And so that's, from an operating perspective. But then also as a region, how do we start thinking about this as an economic growth engine and not mini fiefdoms within the region? And so we need to start thinking much more holistically about how do we build out our transit, transportation, and mobility systems across the region. And so that to me is where the real opportunity is. Let's get through this. The other thing I would say too is that we're looking to start this program in 2028. So we do have, so we've got to get things on the books now, but we have time to fine tune this a little bit. We have time to figure out how to fund some of these things. And we are not asking for, sort of end of the world kinds of funding mechanisms here. This is pretty reasonable in a region that is blessed with resources that are the envy of the country. So we really do need to push on this. And I would say, and I know Kathy and I have talked about this and others in our networks too, is that the business community needs to push harder, and we will push harder, and we need to give more cover to the jurisdictions that our expectations are for an integrated world-class system, irregardless of some of the dysfunctionality or regional fragmentation that we have through the jurisdictions. Sorry, I don't.
No. Thank you, Jack. And I got this signal from the back of the room that we need to kind of wrap up, but because they gave me the microphone, and I don't think they can turn it off. I'm going to talk for a little bit longer. As advocates, I just want you all to think about a few things as you move forward. You had a bunch of technical folks dig through all this stuff for 18 months. We asked questions. I don't see Tom Webster, so he might be here, and a number of other WMATA staff, to the point where I think they wanted to pull their hair out. They didn't get all of it. He still has some hair. But we know what will happen if the region doesn't come together and work to try and solve this problem. We are going to quickly, and quickly is obviously a relative term, but in the next 10 or so years, we will be back with the condition of this system to where we were before 2018. I rode the system then, and I ride it now. And I think we all know it's in a much, much better place and is delivering more value to this region. And so how do we maintain that, those benefits? And as Jack talked about with these headwinds, how do we make these investments in Metro to make this region more competitive as we look at facing some of these headwinds that we're looking at? So the modernization investments that are included in DMV moves are really, really important. One of the other things that the general manager hinted at, and I just want to make kind of the concluding point here, though, is the WMATA team has also brought some stuff to the table that we haven't seen from them in the past. And that's baked into these capital program are a host of investments that will drive down the operating cost long term and make this system more efficient. This was something we asked for back in 2016 and 2015, and we got some kind of examples here. This time, though, it is core to the capital program and the recommendations that we have worked with WMATA to develop through this DMV Moves initiative. So as a region, we need to do this to ensure we have a state of good repair, to ensure that we can remain competitive, and that long-term we have opportunity to drive some of those operating cost curves down. So again, thank you for coming today and listening to this panel. And Kathy, I think I'm supposed to invite you back up. So thank you, Jack, and thank you, Brian.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jack. Really, we need to thank the panelists, Brian, Jack, and Nick, for a rigorous process over the last 18 months that was very technical. I will say this, as an organization that represents the largest employers during that 18-month period, there were times that the conversations, the discussions were much wonkier and much more technical than CEOs wanted to engage in. But what was clear is that there was a process in place and a platform to pull everyone together, many, 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 many voices. And we are just grateful that we were able to come into that process in a way to ask questions, ask repeated questions, answers were offered, solutions were offered, the questions continued, and I really think you created a process where those who chose not to be a part of that, that's also very clear and evident. So thank you to the panel, thank you for the work, As we look to the future, we know what our task is at hand. We know we have a lot more work to do. There are going to be many asks. The business community is going to have to come together and consider the role that we play to make sure that we can take this to the next level and have the right transportation system in place to remain competitive as a region. Now, with that in mind, I do want to keep us moving and introduce our next panel, Designing a Future-Ready Transit and Mobility Network. As a region, we continue to navigate very, very rapid changes in technology, in travel behavior, and needs for safe, reliable mobility. This is a conversation that's going to examine how we can harness data, how we can harness innovation to build a system that meets the moment that we are in today, but also consider a moment in the future and what needs to be in play. So we have some fantastic folks joining us who will bring a distinct vantage point on where mobility is needed. The discussion will be moderated by Patrick McKenna, President and CEO of the Eno Center for Transportation, an institution with more than a century of impact, providing independent research, insight, and leadership across transportation policy and the policy landscape. We also have Laura Schewel, founder and CEO of Streetlight Data, a company that pioneered the use of big data analytics to transform how transportation systems are understood, how they are planned for, and improved. And we have Matthew Walsh, Regional Head of State and Local Public Policy at Waymo, an industry leader advancing autonomous vehicle technology with a goal of beginning operations here in DC in 2026. So please do join me in welcoming a wonderful panel.
Well, great, Kathy, thank you. Again, my name's Patrick McKenna. Thanks for being here today. This is an important discussion when we talk about, and even the information that came earlier, the work that's being done in this region is really second to none. I've been outside of the region for many years, managing transportation networks, and being back here after a hiatus, I can really see the impact of the work that's being done here. The service level's incredible, and to Randy and the WMATA team, I just want to say thank you. We talked about the system, the capital needs and everything, but one of the aspects that Randy does, and does really well at WMATA, is he develops future leaders. And he's partnered with Eno to do that in many instances, and that's one of those hidden opportunities that sometimes leaders miss, but Randy doesn't. Never misses an opportunity to develop his team, and that's developing that future. It's creating a sustainable leadership path for all the work that needs to be done with the investments that hopefully are being made in the region. As was said, I'm president and CEO of the Eno Center for Transportation. Eno is actually not an acronym. Most people might think it's an acronym. It's actually our founder, William Eno. Was one that back in the 1920s and 30s really got involved with traffic regulation and is credited for innovations such as the stop sign, many of the things that keep us safe out there on the roads today. We today bring together leaders across public, private, and academic and nonprofit sectors to help translate innovation into sound governance and long-term sustainable mobility systems. So we're talking about technologies, automated vehicles, real-time mobility data, and new approaches to network design that are advancing faster than our institutions traditionally plan. But technology alone doesn't determine the future of mobility. Governance, funding, and public trust do. At Eno, we study how decisions are made, how funding flows, and how systems can adapt safely and fairly. That's why this conversation is so timely. I want to thank the Greater Washington Partnership and the Board of Trade. Kathy and Jack, have shared a commitment to thriving, connected, and competitive region. and excited to get going. And I just wanted to jump in with Laura. Mobility trends have continued to evolve after the pandemic. Based on current data, how are people actually moving across the region today?
Yeah, so we are, I guess, in phase 3 of pandemic recovery, sort of from a transportation perspective. What we see in this region and in many regions, metropolitan regions of the country, is that there is as much VMT going on, vehicle miles traveled, or depending on the type of vehicle, but the times of day are shifting and leveling out a bit more. That has a positive impact. Despite all the traffic up here, we have plenty of transportation infrastructure. It's just that everybody wants to be on the same infrastructure at the same moment of time, right? That's the challenge. So spreading it out over time of day is sort of a fundamental thing that, as planners, we have always wanted to do, and it sort of happened a little bit organically because of the pandemic. So that's the general shift we see. But of course, that means that a lot of the assumptions of behavior that we used to plan under, that the big motion is always at 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., those assumptions need to be revisited, and that has a lot of implications on what plans might be the right one for any mode of travel moving forward.
And where do you see the gaps between those behaviors and the existing infrastructure and service, and how do you see those developing?
I think looking at transportation and transportation options to serve non-typical commutes. So I'll give you an example. We were working with Samtrans, which is the transit agency in San Mateo County, which is a similar region. It's San Francisco, and then you have a lot of other communities that commute to it. Samtrans runs a lot of commuter buses from the peninsula to San Francisco. As the pandemic recovery returned, some of their express bus lines had huge decreases in ridership, which was a big problem. And at first they thought, maybe everything changed and we have to build new routes. Maybe we need to sort of reconfigure everything. So what we did is we studied the cars as competition to the buses. We analyzed and detailed the car movements and found that in fact the routes were right, but the times of day had shifted. So all Samtrans did was shift timing on a few routes and saw an uptick in ridership by 30% within a month. That's the type of gaps. I think that some of the gaps are quite small. We just have to learn to revisit some of our assumptions, and we have the tools to do that today.
Do those assumptions and data, are they revealing critical safety gaps as well?
Yes and no. I think everyone here is probably aware of the increase in deaths and serious accidents that is facing the entire country over the past 10 years. So this year has been a little better, and I know we'll talk about some autonomous solutions to that as well. But I think a lot of what we see in the data is that there are human errors. And what that means is that we as policymakers or we as infrastructure people, the solutions aren't necessarily fully in our hands. Or rather, the traditional infrastructure solutions aren't going to get us as far as we want. Doesn't mean we should stop. They'll get us part of the way there. But I think on the safety question, it's a much more complex solution that requires more than just the infrastructure tools that I and the agencies are used to working with. I will say the safest mile is the one you don't drive, the one you take in the transit.
Right. Well, great. Matthew, as autonomous vehicle operations begin to scale in the region, what steps should cities and states take now in infrastructure, regulation, and partnerships to enable safe and efficient deployment?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you to the partnership and the Board of Trade for having Waymo participate in this event. I remember being here last year in the audience, and now I'm on stage, so I presume that means I'm doing something right. For those of you not familiar with Waymo, we are an autonomous vehicle technology company. We operate a fully driverless ride-hailing service in 5 major cities across the U.S. Today, just in the last few weeks, we've announced almost more than a dozen new cities across the country and around the world, including London and Tokyo, where we hope to expand. So, show of hands, is that how many people in the audience have been in a Waymo? Okay, all right, I could deal with that. We need to get those numbers up, but it's a good start. So, Patrick, to answer your question, I think what we definitely need to start seeing is, I think, a more collaborative approach. I think there are a lot of things that cities and states can be doing with companies like Waymo now to sort of figure out what are autonomous vehicles going to look like in their communities. I think a lot of states, more than half the country at this point, has adopted AV regulations or some sort of framework for how AVs will deploy in their communities. And at this point now, we're focusing really on the other half of the country, a lot of those places on the eastern side of the country. And so what I think we're seeing now is a lot of cities are starting to feel like they have to play catch up. They're looking to other cities for what has gone right, what has gone wrong. I think what we would encourage is an early and collaborative conversation before we even put vehicles on the road. So, I think here in DC and here in the region, we've had the privilege to test and validate and map since 2024. As was mentioned during the intro, we have plans to hopefully deploy our service in 2026. And so I think that the more early we can start those conversations, the smoother the deployments will be, and the more that we can also figure out what are the unique needs of certain cities. Not every city is created equally, and so we as a company want to make sure that we are addressing some of those unique conditions that exist in places like here in DC before we deploy our service.
What do you think the lessons from early adopters that can be applied to this region are, particularly with safety as well?
I think, listen, if you look at places like Chandler, Arizona, where we started talking to Chandler when we began operations as far back as 2018, they were very welcoming. They wanted to understand what were the benefits that we were going to be bringing, how could their constituents benefit from this, what were some of the safety standards that we were putting in place. But they were incredibly forward-thinking. They really leaned into this technology, and if you look at how that has evolved, we had a very small service in Chandler, and now our territory in Phoenix is over 350 square miles, including 24/7 operations at Sky Harbor International Airport. So I really love using the Phoenix example as one of something where cities really leaned in early in the beginning. Worked closely with Waymo, and listen, there were certainly bumps along the way, right? It wasn't a completely smooth process, but because we had that relationship early on, we were able to address things as they popped up. And now Phoenix is one of our largest markets, and we've become kind of ubiquitous within the transportation fabric there.
How do you see AVs complementing and not really competing with, but complementing the public transit network, especially in creating, a more reliable first and last mile type of activity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at Waymo, you will hear us talk a lot about mass transit and how we can increase ridership into existing mass transit systems in cities we operate in, not compete. I do think there is a little bit of a misconception that has been popping up in cities across the country now where they view the deployment of autonomous vehicles like Waymo as something that is going to displace ridership on mass transit. We could not disagree more with that, and we've actually taken proactive steps to try to increase ridership. So if you look at places like San Francisco and Los Angeles right now, we know that nearly 40% of Waymo riders are using the product to get to a mass transit hub. And so we want to actually encourage and incentivize that. So just in the last year, we actually had a program where our riders, if they used a Waymo to go to a transit hub, we gave them a $3 credit in their accounts to use on a future Waymo ride. Just 2 weeks ago, we announced in LA a new partnership with LA Metro where Waymo will now be part of the Mobility Wallet program. So participants in that program will now be able to have reduced fare or discounted rides in the LA area on Waymo. And so we want to be a solution in increasing ridership in parts of the system where ridership has historically been on the decline. We know that a lot of people want to try to fill that first and last miles. How do they get to Metro? And as Waymo can be a part of that solution, we're excited about that, and I think we're in early conversations with a lot of transit systems across the U.S. right now.
That's great. When we think of kind of national best practices, looking at that, what examples, Laura, from other cities or regions stand out as successful models for integrating AVs, real-time mobility data, and kind of how can regions, states, municipalities start integrating that data into their actual design to better inform and protect vulnerable road users, those types of things as we're going.
Yeah. So I think LA and SCAG in particular has been really forward-looking. I think the cities that tend to innovate, and I'll say cities and regions that tend to innovate, are the ones that have a problem. So Metro Washington has been really innovative in the use of travel demand programs because there was no other option, right? LA, huge safety issues, huge traffic issues. They've been really aggressive in using data to identify not just where vulnerable road users are, which itself is very hard. Like, I'm a data person. I've been running this data analytics company for 15 years. We are still just at the beginning of real pedestrian and bicycle analytics that can really inform. So I think SCAG's a good model to look at. They've really been exploring all sorts of different options, and in planning for the Olympics, and we have many other cities planning for the World Cup, it has really spurred a lot of realization that you got to do something differently, right? Like, so I think those cities are confronting such a crunch that they're getting into it. So I would look to SCAG. I also think that one of the things we see happening, and I don't see it in many states yet, but I do see it in regions, is realizing that you framed coming back from the pandemic and the changes. I think people want to feel that we're reaching a new steady point, right? They're like, oh, okay, the change is over. We're having a steady point now. That's not happening. It's going to keep on changing. Whether it's autonomy, whether it's a huge shift in employment in certain regions, including this one, in other regions because of AI, things are going to keep on changing very rapidly. So the cities that are doing best are the cities that are saying, I both have to plan infrastructure for a 30-year horizon and plan for a future that is going to be different than today, and I'm not quite sure how. So what I am working on and am most excited about is where we see people doing planning across multiple scenarios, saying, okay, I'm not just going to like predict the future, say economic growth is going to be this, ridership is going to be that, and then run a model, but say, what is an investment that will make sense against 5 very disparate futures? And thinking in that more robustness framework is really where I see the best decisions being made, because we cannot predict what it's going to be like.
Yeah, that integration of planning is critical. And it runs against frameworks that are very tradition based and very difficult to kind of break up, because
exactly.
Even the public process within, say, state DOTs or others are well known. They're well beaten paths. So the ability to use this data to help inform the planning, to help inform the design, and to welcome the different modes and to do it safely, I think it's really one of the critical areas. How should leaders, Matt, how should leaders in DC, Maryland, and Virginia kind of adapt those lessons to this region in a way that works for your company as well?
Yeah, and I mean, I think just to sort of piggyback off the data point, I mean, we're trying to figure out now what are some of the data points that we are out there collecting, right? I mean, our vehicles have a tremendous amount of hardware on them. There's a lot of real-time data collection. Things like potholes, where, real-time pedestrian and cyclist data on the VRU side. Like, we're really in some active discussions right now with cities across the country about what are those categories of data that cities are not getting on a real-time basis that we as private sector, and they're out there on their roads every single day, may be able to help fill that gap. And so I think for us, that's something, and I think there'll be more to come on that subject in the coming months about some exciting new things we're going to be rolling out on that. But I think, here in the region, I think that, I think the DMV region is unique in that this will likely be the first true multi-jurisdictional region in the country to have to address autonomous vehicles. There's nowhere else in the US right now where we have had to really approach that. Like, how is Waymo as a company going to operate across multiple jurisdictions at one time? And so I do think that there is a unique opportunity here for the DMV to really lead in how you implement that regional approach. And so I think we've obviously had some very productive conversations here in the district. We've had some very productive conversations in Maryland. We had some legislation there. I think Virginia is coming up along as well. But I think in order for a system like Waymo to really work and more importantly, to really be able to serve every single person here in the region and get them to where they need to go, there does need to be that region.
traditional approach.
Yeah, that's really exciting to hear about that shared data. The dream really for operating a system from an operations standpoint is full 24/7 situational awareness. You want condition information feeding into your backbone systems. You want reliability information feeding into them as well, so that you can deploy your resources to modify a bad situation or move forward. So, and that's been a real challenge, I think, trying to address that data governance from a standpoint where a private sector is concerned about the non-public information. The public doesn't want that necessarily shared with the government. But there's got to be that kind of subset of data that is really valuable in the public space. It's anonymized. It's in a way that's still going to protect your IP as an organization, but still provides service to the public. It's going to help the public-private partnerships flourish. So that's great to hear. And Laura, where do you see the biggest opportunities for the private sector leadership to support this, to support safer, more efficient, more future-ready regional mobility? This data sharing, curb management, electrification, other areas that you can think of.
Yeah. So I love what you were saying about data availability, and to bring it back to something on the prior panel when we talk about the efficiency of the corridor, right? The efficiency of the infrastructure, because unfortunately we don't have infinity money. So to take a step back, Streetlight, the company I founded, works to take data that was thrown off by a different system and make it useful for transportation. So we take data that's thrown off by connected cars that have GPS, by smartphones, by all sorts of other things that are moving around, trucks and that sort of thing, turn it into useful analytics. And we have been building that privacy protective case, both for the companies that provide us data and the individuals that are involved, own the devices themselves, for over a decade. And it's tricky, but it is very doable, and the financial savings it has brought are enormous. So when we talk about the advent of data that could come off of vehicles that have cameras and LiDAR and all sorts of other sensors, and instead of building out literally billions of dollars of sensors along our roadways that then have to be maintained, which itself is really expensive, and instead redeploying that capital to, more rail, and using the ambient data. That is a huge efficiency when we look at the future financing. And that type of partnership, to basically use an investment the private sector is making twice, I call it the data recycling. I think that's very exciting, and I think we're about to kick off sort of a new wave of it with all of the connected vehicles. So that's exciting for me. I also think that as nerdy as it sounds, one of the things that we're all going to have to work for over the next few years is a few reforms in the way we think about data standardization. So again, I've been doing this 15 years. That was the beginning of the whole smart cities tech wave, when that was the buzzword, and that's what everybody wanted to talk about. That's what all the startups were in, and we were all going to have these data lakes that had standardized data, and everybody was going to be able to plug into them. It has not gone super well. And so I've evolved to this I sort of see it as a pair of lungs in my brain, where on the one side, what we see very clearly is agencies need data in the format they need it, and the cost to shift to a standard is just not something we've seen the agencies be able to handle, both the resource cost and the financial cost. At the same time, from the private sector, different data coming out of each city or locality is a non-starter, right? It just means that none of these tools can sail. So instead, you have consulting firms who make a ton of money just building these sort of translation systems. And I should say, Streetlight was acquired 4 years ago by Jacobs Engineering Group, so I'm one of those consulting firms that makes tons of money building these translation systems. I think we're getting to a place in data governance where it's just a lot easier to build those translations. So like every data system will be a pair of lungs. So on this side is the way the city or the agency needs it for itself, and then we just have a series of connectors that translate it. And I think the technology for that is getting really efficient. So I think maybe we've moved to a space where we shouldn't be spending thousands of hours in committees about getting everybody on the same data standard, but instead change it to what's a central data standard we can partner with the private sector on for whatever it is, AV indicators, CAV systems that tell you there's a queue coming up, and then just learning how to translate in, because the attempt to make everyone the same isn't getting off the ground.
Yeah, and I think even, when you've got a multi-jurisdictional area
Yes.
like the DMV, it becomes even more complicated because there are, it's that public involvement piece that each region is going to continue to be different.
Yeah.
Each municipality is going to continue to be different in terms of how it manages its data governance. So, those translators are really important, and that's kind of a built-in frustration from an agency standpoint. As hard as it is to secure the resources to pull that data in, there is also this concern about the cost of that integration.
Yes.
So, how do each of the municipalities in this region work on governance structures that can enable this rather than hinder it? Because I think it's really a key to operational efficiency for all of us that are in the transportation network business.
Yeah, I think it's to start with the idea that it's going to be a translator and not say you're going to have to change everything in your internal systems. And I think that's where we see people start by trying to, again, not universally, but people start by trying to change everything internal. That is a mess. And then they finally get to the translation. So I think starting with a translation, and we haven't said it much, but I think the word AI is going to start coming up more and more, and this is a place where AI is actually quite useful, is that data translation. Right. So again, it's having a central group that manages what do you have to translate to, and doesn't get all up in the business of what are you doing with the data in your own world.
Right. I think we're getting there. I just want to kind of close with one question for both of you. What's one partnership policy shift or mindset change that could most speed up our region's ability to adapt and lead in a future-ready mobility, particularly in improving safety?
So one wonky one, and this touches on some federal stuff, but I think there's room for interpretation, which is a lot of the money that is spent is designed in a way that it's assumed that it will be spent on hours and people billing hourly. And again, I'm saying this as a representative of a consulting firm that does this. We need to make it neutral how the thing is delivered, right? We can't say, oh, we're buying 4,000 hours of your time. We should say we're buying a reduction in response time to crashes of 10%. And you get there somehow. And it doesn't matter if it's a mixture of hours and subscriptions and technology, right? So I think that's the biggest shift, is agencies framing what they want in terms of outcomes and then providing flexibility on how the private sector gets to those outcomes. That's where you're going to drive the innovation.
Right.
I think what I would love to see in terms of a shift, I think it's more collaborating on how, not if. The reality is, in the case of autonomous vehicles, the reality is here, right? We are, Waymo, just alone as a company, we're doing 250,000 fully driverless paid rides every single week in the 5 markets I just mentioned. We're going to be expanding to more than a dozen in the next year. Tens of thousands of people are using AVs to go to the grocery store, to doctor's appointments, to the airport. So this idea that this is some far-off futuristic concept, it's not. You can call somebody who lives in one of those cities and you can ask them about it. So I think really what I'd love to see is more about how do we make this work in a particular city or market or in a region like here in the DMV, not, is this going to happen? Because it is going to happen. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here for cities that haven't had AVs historically to really figure out what are the benefits that they can have, right? We know right now that Waymo vehicles are involved in 5 times fewer injury-causing crashes than human drivers, right? It's a 91% reduction in serious injury-causing crashes. It's more sustainable. We operate a fully EV fleet. It's more equitable. Our vehicles go to the entirety of a territory we operate in. So I see huge upside here for cities, and I'd love to have a more collaborative partnership with cities on, how do we bring these benefits? Because we want to do that. And so I think that is sort of the shift that we're looking for, and we're seeing it already. And I think here in the DMV region, there's been a lot of discussion over the last, even just 12 to 18 months about what autonomous vehicles are going to look like. And so hopefully we'll continue to see more of that. And I should also just make a plug here. For those of you who haven't seen a Waymo vehicle, we have one right outside on the 8th Street entrance. So I encourage you to go out there. Hopefully it's not too rainy, and you can see the technology yourself firsthand.
Well, that's great. Thank you both for participating in this conversation. I think, when we're, as consumers of transportation, we're all going through this somewhat chaotic change. but it's happening so rapidly, and it's happening right before our eyes, and it's bringing better service, it's going to improve safety, and it's going to integrate with the systems that are the backbone of a region like this, like the transit systems and others. The transportation network is going to benefit, and the region's going to benefit, and its people are. Hopefully get that commute time down into the 20 minutes here in the real near future. But I want to thank Kathy and Jack for this forum and for the ability to participate in it, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your coming out today. Really good conversation. Just a couple of quick takeaways. For me, one is thinking a lot about how technology is going to be deployed around our mobility issues in the region, and also to stop thinking about these issues independently. We as a region need a true regional integrated mobility system and all the component parts to that. And so that's something that we'll be working a lot on. And so I wanted to thank you for that. I wanted to thank our panelists, our speakers today. I wanted to thank our sponsors very much. Thank all of you for attending. There's a lot more to come. We're in a good place, but there's a lot to do. So thank you, and have a great day.